to session 11 of the Academia 2063 Ukraine Crisis webinar series. I am Laibu Take, and I'm the Director of Communication and Outreach for Academia 2063. So delighted, so honored to have you here again. You have been joining us since we launched this series in November 2022 to discuss the socioeconomic ramifications of the Ukraine crisis for African countries. Thank you for expecting this weekly rendezvous, and we sincerely appreciate your interest and your participation in these sessions. Please go to the chat and tell us your name, tell us the organization you represent, and what you hope to see during this session. We will be following closely. Today, in this session 11, we will discuss global fertilizer and wheat trade and market disruptions, impacts on agricultural productivity growth, and food security for Rwanda. We are looking forward to a highly interactive session with you all, and we invite you to please monitor the chat to get links to the briefs which are going to be referenced during this session. You will receive links to the briefs which are being discussed during this session and other links to other relevant resources on the Academia 2063 Ukraine Crisis portal. As always, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in English and French. Please click on the globe icon on your screen should you need that function, and we are live streaming on our YouTube channel, Academia 2063. Join the conversation on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook by tagging us at Academia 2063. And please, during this conversation, if you have any comments, questions, contributions, kindly head to the Q&A and drop them, and they will be brought to the floor during the conversation. And of course, if you wish to intervene live, you're invited to raise your hand and the moderator will give you the floor. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, please welcome the moderator of today's session. He's a senior researcher at ZEF, University of Bonn, Dr. Lucas Conner.
Good afternoon and welcome everybody. It's my great pleasure and honor to moderate the 11th edition of Academia 2063's webinar series on the Ukraine crisis. In this series, we hear from experts on how the Ukraine crisis impacts African economies. Friday last week was the first anniversary of the Russian attack on Ukraine. In many aspects, this day has changed the world that we were used to. In February last year, we already faced rising food prices. The price increases were related to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also to increases in production costs of food, including fertilizer, but also energy prices. Both Ukraine and Russia are large exporters of maize and wheat, and together are responsible for about a third of global potassium supply. This has led to unprecedented wheat price rallies during February to April last year, which only calmed down mid of 2022, when it became apparent that Ukraine and Russia's grain production, at least in parts, could be exported. This was to some extent facilitated by the Black Sea Grain Initiative. Currently, this initiative lasts until April, but there's no guarantee that it will be extended. Therefore, there continues to be great uncertainty about global food and fertilizer price movements. Several African countries strongly depend on wheat imports. Rwanda is one of them. Egypt, Sudan, Somalia, Kenya are just a few others. Almost all African countries are highly dependent on fertilizer imports, particularly phosphate and potassium. This alone is a threat to African economies and their food systems. And the fact that the world, and Africa in particular, has not recovered yet from the economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic make things even more severe. To facilitate adequate policy responses, profound research is needed. What are the economic impacts of the crisis? What are the long-term effects? What are the mechanism and of course, what should be done, what needs to be done? This is what the Ukraine crisis series is about. So we are glad to have a distinguished speaker today, helping us to find answers to these important questions. Today's speaker is Dr. Ismail Fofana, Director, Capacity and Development at Academia 2063. Ismail holds a PhD in economics from Sorbonne in Paris. His work focuses on issues related to agriculture and food, macro policies, gender, economic inequality, and poverty reduction. Ismail is one of the global leaders in macroeconomic modeling of agri-food policies. He had appointments with Laval University, where the PEP model is hosted, with IFPRI, first in DC and also in Dakar. Over the last decades, Ismail coordinated the work of AgroDep and supported the RESAX network. All of the work is of high policy relevance and yielded into better policy making in Africa. So we are in good hands indeed. Within the next 20 minutes, Ismail will report on global fertilizer and wheat trade disruptions, impacts on agricultural productivity, growth, and food security for Rwanda. After these 20 minutes presentations, we will have discussions and questions. If you want to share something during the presentation, please use the Q&A so that Ismail can freely continue and speak. And afterwards, we will be happy to bring this to the floor to read out your questions. But of course, you can also raise your hand and contribute to the discussion. So thank you very much. Ismail, the floor is yours. We are excited to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucas. It's a pleasure to be online with you from Dakar, Senegal. And I'm happy to present the work that's a piece of work that we have been undertaking over the last month since the Russia-Ukraine war started. And today I'm going to talk about the disruption in the global fertilizer and wheat trade and market, and what is the implication for the Rwanda's economy in terms of agriculture productivity, growth, and food security. My presentation is going to be structured into these 7 points. So I'm going to start talking about the price shocks that we have witnessed in these 2 markets, wheat and fertilizer. Then I will talk about the exposure of Rwanda to these 2 markets, wheat and fertilizer. Then briefly, I'm going to discuss the analytical framework, the simulation scenarios. Then I'll start presenting some of the results that the findings of our studies on Rwanda, first focusing on wheat and its impact on food security. Then I will move to fertilizer, the productivity, agricultural productivity and growth implications. And then finally, I'm going to conclude with giving you some elements of how the government of Rwanda responded to the global fertilizer market disruption. So let me start with the global wheat and fertilizer price shocks. So here you have a graph that shows the wheat prices before the onset of the war and after the onset of the war. So on the blue bars that you're seeing here was a price for wheat that were predicted on October 2021, meaning before the Ukraine crisis started. And then on the black bar are the same prediction, but 1 year later. So on October 2022, where the forecast for the wheat prices also was released by the World Bank. So you can see that while before the crisis, the trend was downward. So prices were starting to recover from the COVID pandemic. But with the the war started on in February last year. So basically, we have the reverse effect. Prices increase sharply for in 2022. And then what you're observing is prices are still will remain high in 2023 and 2024. So what you have here is compared to the prices in 2021. All right, so prices increase, but you can see that they declined a little bit in 2023 and in 2024, but they're still going to remain high into 2024. We have almost the same figure for fertilizer. Here you have the price changes for fertilizer also for the same period. So in blue, you have what was predicted before the onset of the war, and in black and gray is what is predicted 1 year later in 2022. And then here we can see, except for potassium, that all prices was declining, recovering from COVID pandemic, except for potassium, as I said, potassium chloride, where prices were still increasing. But with the war, you can see that prices increase more sharply for potassium chloride, but also for other fertilizer like phosphate and urea. So now let's talk about Rwanda's exposure to these markets. Those are global prices, the way they have changed over time. But if Rwanda is not importing, exporting any of these commodities, then it doesn't matter for Rwanda because it's not going to affect the country. But that is not the case here. Rwanda is directly importing these commodities from Russia and Ukraine. That's what we compute here as the import dependency rate, dependency to Russia and Ukraine. So you can see that in average over the period of 2011 and 2020, Rwanda was importing almost 13% of its fertilizer from these two countries. But Rwanda is also totally dependent on the global market, including Russia and Ukraine, for his fertilizer, for fertilizer. You can see it through the import penetration rate, which is 100% here. So the import divided by the consumption, domestic consumption, so it's 100%. So meaning that the total consumption or needs is satisfied by the international global market. It is the same story for wheat. Rwanda is dependent to the two countries, Russia and Ukraine. And the dependency rate is more higher here compared to fertilizer, 44%. And Rwanda is also totally dependent, or almost totally dependent on the global market for also the wheat, this wheat need. But what we have observed is Rwanda is importing more than what the country it needs. All right, you can see here that the import penetration rate is more than 100%, meaning that is importing more than what the country is consuming. Then the question is what Rwanda is doing with the additional, the extra import. Then the country is engaged in re-exportation, regional re-exportation here. So you can see here that Rwanda is re-exporting mainly into the DR Congo, and it's exposing indirectly DR Congo to the global wheat market shocks through this re-exportation. We have the same phenomena in with other countries. Burundi also re-exporting to DR Congo. We can see also that Mauritius re-exporting to Comoros, to Madagascar, and to Seychelles. But you have this will have a kind of regional contagion effect You don't need to be engaged in the global market of fertilizer or wheat. You can be exposed through your neighbors that you're exporting to your country. That's the case between Rwanda and DRC here. Then let's talk about quickly the analytical framework here. So we use the single country CG models that are being developed over the past 2 decades within the RISAX initiative. So the single country models are available for almost 40 African countries. And the one for Rwanda was used to make the simulation and to see the impact on the ag sector and also the economy in general. We use other databases to update the simulation model. So here we use the World Development Indicators. We use it for the macroeconomic data that are available in this database, and we use also statistics on international trade from the United Nations here for import and export data to update the model. And then we use the World Economic Outlook from the IMF to make projections on the growth outlook of Rwanda, but also we use the primary commodity price database from the World Bank to also project prices. So here the World Bank maintain what they call the commodity market the price database, and then they make predictions twice a year on the price of 46 primary commodities on April and on October. And these are the two databases that we use to build the simulation scenarios. So let me talk about the simulation scenarios. So basically we run two scenarios. One is the baseline scenario, which is if we did not observe any major disruptions in the global economy, in the Rwanda's economy, and just having a smooth recovery from the pandemic. So that's our assumption for the baseline scenario. Here we use the economic growth outlook from IMF, which was released on October 2021, to have that growth outlook for the next 3 years, 2022, 2023, and 2024 for Rwanda. And then we also use the commodity market outlook for the same period, but which was released the same on October 2021, also for the World Bank, from the World Bank. So meaning that all this information was generated before the crisis, before the Ukraine crisis. And then we have what we call the Ukraine scenario. The Ukraine scenario is the one that we assume that the disruption that we have observed between the two focus between the one in 2021 and the one in 2022 is due to the war, ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. So here then, what we used is the commodity market outlook, the recent one on October 2022, last year. And then we look at what are the predictions for the same commodities, the prices of the same commodities for the next 3 years. I mean, 2022, but also is an estimate already. But for 2023 and 2024, we look at, there are still predictions. And then we use that information to implement the price shocks in the model and look at now what is the economic growth outcomes and other macro variables. So let's start with the wheat market disruption or the wheat price shocks. So basically what we have observed for wheat is is we have a very modest changing, increase in food insecurity due to the wheat market disruption. There is a negative effect on food security in Rwanda, but it's small. Here we've observed that the price shock increase revenue prices, and revenue in the rural area, because there is still a small share of small production of wheat taking place in Rwanda. So the farmers and the production, I said, that are involved in that production, in that wheat production, will have benefit from the price increase, but it's very small. You can see here in this one circle in red that wheat in Rwanda is 1.2% of agriculture GDP and 0.3% of the economy-wide GDP. So it's very small, right? That's why we have that effect only happening, affecting rural areas. But this is only in 2022. But you see that in 2023 and 2024, the income effect is negative for all areas due to the inflationary effect that you have, and then the contraction of the economy, the slowdown of the economy, etc. So that's what we're seeing on the food price index here. Food price index is increasing for all areas, even if it's very small, as I say. It's small also because wheat is just around 1% of the food consumption basket, so it's not that big. That's why you don't have a very important food price inflationary effect here, but still you have a certain level of inflationary effect. And then you have then the increase in food prices due to the wheat market disruptions, basically will generate a decline in consumption, in food consumption. Here you see decline in all areas. It's like a kind of taxing incomes. So part of the incomes, the consumers are losing part of their income because of the higher, their possession power is declining because of the higher price of wheat. So let's now move to the agriculture productivity and growth effect for the fertilizer market. So basically, fertilizer here is concentrated in a few crops here in Rwanda. For instance, you can see that maize is using a big share of fertilizer, pulses, but also we have other crops. In other crops, see, you have vegetables there, fruit also are using a fertilizer. But when you compare the fertilizer, the share of total fertilizer with the share of agricultural value added, so kind of a proxy for fertilizer use intensity, you can see also that rice is relatively, use relatively, high proportion of fertilizer. So basically, with the price increase, you observe a decline in the use of fertilizer for all crops here, and the decline is between 28 and 36% annually. And that decline increases over the years. When you compare 2022 here in blue to 2023 and 2024, so the increase is higher because of the lingering effect of the productivity shock during the past, season. So that's also affects, productivity use, fertilizer use and productivity during the next season. In terms of impact on on productivity, sorry, was the fertilizer use, productivity story here now. You have a decline in productivities for the ag sector, but also for the crop sector in blue. And then you have a decline in productivity for the entire agriculture sector here. You can see, as I was saying, that the decline is higher in 2023 and 2024 because of the lingering effect. And then here we look at value added, our value added for crops, for agriculture, and also the economy-wide value added declines over time. So basically, the crop value added decline is very close to the Ag 1 because of crops contribute for 89% of the total value added of the sector. But you can see for the economy-wide, it's a little bit lower in 2022. And then the economy-wide impact increases, over the years, 2023, and then 2024 is close to what you're observing as increase for the crop and agriculture. All this because of the lingering effect, the growth, productivity, low productivity generate lower value added, lower income level, so lower income level, and then lower investment. Low investment then become another additional shocks to the productivity in the next period, because you still have a higher productivity, higher fertilizer prices through the 3 years into 2024, but that's high productivity, high fertilizer prices, and low productivity now is being combined with lower investment shock in the country. So that's what you're saying, that the GDP for the ag sector, but also for the economy wide, is increasing over time. And finally, here, this is a quick, it's not part of the brief, probably that some of you have read, but we wanted to add a little bit more information on how the government of Rwanda reacted to these high fertilizer prices. Basically, the fertilizer prices for the season for 2022-2023 is being subsidized in the country. And you can see here for the 2 season, that the rate of subsidy, basically the prices that the government is subsidizing is fixed for the 2 seasons. You can see for different category of fertilizer. And because of the international price is changing, then the rate of subsidy is a little bit changing over time. So basically, that's what the government is doing. Our next step in this analysis is now to look at, to go further into the analysis and then simulate the government response. So this subsidy to fertilizer, to see whether this is it is the best move for the government. Basically, is to assess the opportunity cost of the investment made in fertilizer. The question is whether there are other alternatives to subsidizing fertilizer who will give almost the same result or will be more beneficial. Then that's where the analysis of the opportunity cost is important, to make sure that this is the best move of the government in order to provide more to guide the government interventions in the current crisis, but beyond the current crisis also for the future, the upcoming crisis. Thank you for your attention, and I give back the floor to Lucas.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ismail, for this very clear presentation, very strong findings, very devastating findings, of course, as well. Before I think the group is warming up and starts with questions, let me start with some clarification questions on the model, maybe that helps the others also to get ideas. On the last slide, you talked about the fertilizer subsidy. Is that already in the model now? So in your baseline and your scenarios, do you consider the subsidy? And maybe two more technical questions. How is the model dealing with wage price elasticity? So how do wages respond to price changes, and how do also prices within the model react to increasing wheat prices? So is there kind of a transmission between the different crop prices, or is it mostly the index that takes care of it? So maybe those questions for everyone else to warm up.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Lucas. So for the first one, now the subsidy, government subsidy to the fertilizer prices are not included in the model. So we assume that there is a full transmission. So now the next step in our analysis is to introduce a subsidy. You don't have full transmission anymore. So part of the fertilizer prices is being the cost is being bared by the government, and then the government has to get the money somewhere to pay for it. Now that's the question. That's the opportunity cost assessment that we have to do. All right. Is it what I mean? What is the real the real scenario where the money came from? Is it coming from abroad, government lending money? But even if it's coming from abroad, if the government have used that money in somewhere else instead of subsidizing fertilizer, should we have, should the government will have higher return in terms of food security? But if the government is raising fund from the domestic economy in terms of maybe some of the taxes has been raised, or etc. So those are the kind of prospective analysis that we have to do to make sure that this is the best move of government in terms of improving food security in the country, or protecting consumer from the fertilizer market disruption. Now the other questions on the wage, basically because of the short-term assessment, so we did not allow wages to adjust to prices. So wages for really are in relative term are fixed. So they did not adjust for the CPI, the consumption price, the consumer price shocks. They are adjusted in real term. They are fixed with the price index that we use in the model. So the consumer prices will include external inflations, and also will include also if there is any internal inflation, etc. So the CPI is different from the price index that we use. So we did not allow that. There have been adjustment over the next 3 years because of the short-term analysis. And I think there are evidence that also show that prices, wages catch up. There's a lag between wage increase and the price inflation that we observe in general. And the other question is the price transmissions. Basically prices are transmitted through the international trade, the external trade in the model. So you have the import and the export side. So basically wheat and fertilizer are not exported, they are mostly imported. So you have a kind of imperfect substitution effect between external commodities and internal and domestic commodities. And basically, you can observe that for wheat, wheat is produced even a little bit in the country, so prices of wheat increase, and then you have substitution effect with other staples also, especially cereals that are close substitute to wheat, and that is also taken into account in the model. So you have this price transmitted into the economy and close and substitution effect with close product or commodities. For the fertilizer, less likely, maybe with firmware, that's used, but has not been reflected in our model, as the country is not producing these fertilizer that we're talking about, so you don't have that substitution effect taking place. Thank you. Back to you.
Great. Thanks a lot for those clarifications. I think there's a comment by David in the chat on wage development in Rwanda. I think it's in line with what you said. But at the same time, there's a question by Innocent in the Q&A. What are the triggering factors for the decreasing food price in 2023 in urban, rural, and all? In your model, so I'm not sure whether I think it's less of an increase, but it's still an increase, right, as compared to previous years. But maybe do you think you can comment on this?
Did you say the triggering effect on food decline in food consumption?
Declining food prices, I think.
No, the food prices are increasing.
I think the comment is referring to the fact that the increase was higher in 2022 than in 2023. I think that is what the question is about. But I think the bottom line is that prices are always higher than in the baseline, right?
Yeah, and they are increasing. Basically, you have the supply shocks happening also. So as I said, you have that lingering effect, which combined now, the first year you have only one shocks that's happening in the economy. So basically it's the high fertilizer price, that are increasing. And then you have a low supply of agricultural commodities and food commodities. And then that will also increase prices and then decrease consumption. Then in the subsequent years, for instance, you have basically, because of that negative inflation, the inflationary effect, you'll have a kind of a slowdown of the economy, and then that will also have an impact on income, on savings. That will reflect, will also impact the investment, but investment in the subsequent year. So basically the subsequent year, you have two shocks happening at the same time. You have the prices, higher prices that are impacting the economy, high fertilizer prices, but also you have lower investment also the combination of those two effects will have a further decline, have further supply shocks in the ag sector, and then availability of food, and then higher prices. Basically, that's the dynamic behind in the model. So yes, you have prices are increasing over time, from 2022 to 2024 because of this lingering effect of the show.
Great, thank you. Still not seeing any hands. Please participate. Okay, maybe Innocent can maybe add to that question.
Thank you, Dr. Israel. I think the presentation was very useful and informative. But my question is, I'm Innocent from the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources. I'm in charge of environment and climate change. So last week we have our season forecast for the 3 months coming, March, April, and May, where the prediction showed that dry conditional will be likely to continue over the Horn of Africa include Rwanda for this season. And you know that we are talking in agriculture, and we are still talking about the rain-fed agriculture, which is dominant here in Rwanda. Is it the model have been considered the weather factors? That's my question.
Thanks, Innocent. No, the models did not include any other shocks apart of the global trade. Global trade and market disruption for primary commodities. So it's only looking at one channel at the time, so that you can address, one issue at a time. We did not combine other external shocks, but we have parallelly another work stream that my colleague, one of my colleagues, one of our department is also working on, is the predicting, agricultural productivity using remote sensing and artificial intelligence and machine learning. That's provide a kind of predictions of the way of the seasons looks like, in terms of agricultural production. And that one will include all the disruption that you may observe, including, the biophysical factors, that the way they are impacting production. So that's model, yes, can introduce this kind of factor. But our models look at only one channel, which is the global trade one. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that this is the scenario if nothing is done. So there's still scope for policy intervention to make things look better than they appear in the model. And of course, there can be also shocks. That's always the case. I think there is an interesting comment again by David asking whether there are maybe differences in macro models as compared to micro evidence on fertilizer, on yield responses to fertilizer. So do you have any answer to that? Maybe do we overestimate the fertilizer effect when we look at micro data? Maybe they are not that strong. Do you have an answer to that question?
This kind of models is always based on the micro behavior. So basically the model that we're using, it's not only macro, looking at the macro structure of the economy, but it's based on micro behavior of producer and micro behavior of consumer. So basically, behind the models, what we use is what we call the fertilizer use elasticity, elasticity of productivity, fertilizer use elasticity. And this elasticity is coming from micro estimations, econometric estimations. So they are estimates that have been done by FAO. So those are the micro estimation that we use. So when it happens that in this specific case of Rwanda, that has the micro behavior have changed over time, yes, we may have a kind of little bias in the results. But still, I think what can be done is what we call in this kind of analysis, the sensitivity analysis around these parameters. So basically, even if you expect in the short term that micro behavior may change, you're not going to be, it's not going to be a radical change. You're going to be around probably the number that you have, if that number is recent. And then you just move around and see how your results is affected by moving a little bit around that number. So yes, that's a kind of additional analysis we can do.
Yeah, but I think your results are pretty in line with what others find. I think David Laborde has estimated some elasticities, and we ourselves have also done some fertilizer response functions, and the effects are similar. But of course, what you mention is the amount of transmission that actually happens in the country is unclear. So and this is something to be worked on, and of course this would maybe reduce the price effects on fertilizer use. Before I give the floor to Julie, there is one question from the Q&A. They're asking for the heterogeneity or the reasons for heterogeneity of the effects rural versus urban households. Do you have any explanation for that? And then maybe Julie.
Yeah, because of agriculture sector is mostly an activity that is undertaken in rural area. So basically, rural households are, when we take the case of wheat, for instance, wheat and fertilizer both, they are affected on the supplies, on the income side more than compared to, and then they are also affected on the price, on the price effect, the inflationary effect. And but while urban, who are engaged more in non-agriculture activities, are more likely to be affected by the inflationary food price increase or food price inflationary effect. So that's basically the the heterogeneity that we are observing. So if you take wheat, because wheat is you have a small production of wheat, so basically you have that price transmissions, which will benefit a little bit rural areas, rural producers and rural areas compared to urban. But still you have this generalized price increase, food price increase effect, which affect everybody. So basically, then you see here that the combination of income, positive income for rural, negative effect for rural, and then that will have an impact on their consumption. On the other hand, you don't have any positive impact for urban, but you have the same negative, then you expect them to be more affected than rural. When you take fertilizer, you have the basically the opposite scenario, because they are the one using fertilizer in that in their production activities. I'm talking about rural. Then you see the income effect here, because less higher price of fertilizer there, so the income is affected on the other way around, negatively. So you expect them to be more affected than urban with the same income and price. Basically, it's this income and price effect that gives you the ultimate consumption effect, real consumption effect. Thank you.
Perfect. Julie?
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Ismail, for the presentation. In line with Lucas's remark that the model shows what would happen in the absence of any intervention, I was just curious what we know about actual changes in fertilizer use in Rwanda, and also what we know about agricultural production in 2022. And maybe this is a question, maybe for Ismail, but maybe for anybody else who might be familiar with what's happening on the ground. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Good question, Julie. I think that's one of the why this kind of ex-ante analysis is useful, because you do this kind of ex-ante analysis because the information data on the ground is not available yet. So basically, you generate that data in order to inform policy decision. So myself, I don't have any information about the availability of such data, but also that's the first thing. The second point that I want to mention is basically the statistic that you're going to get on the ground is a combination of many other channels or many other shocks, including the one that we are analyzing here. So Innocent was talking about the the shocks, biophysical shocks that may happen, right now in Rwanda. So that one combined with the global shocks and maybe other shocks again. So all this information is going to be channeled through what you're going to gather as information. So basically, in the end, it will be difficult to disentangle which shocks, has, contributed in which direction and how much, etc. That's why these kind of models will help you to disentangle that, because focusing on only one aspect and say, okay, we've observed but fertilizer use has decreased by this amount, but let's think about that there are multiple shocks that are happening at the same time. But there's a study that has disentangled that, global fertilizer prices, has contributed, may have contributed by 90%, something like that. All right. And then this gives useful information to decision makers to do something about that specific channel. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think it's an important comment indeed. Prices is one thing, but at some point there was also the question if fertilizer are even available, regardless of the price, because it was difficult to get fertilizers out of Russia and Belarus. So availability is maybe one thing that also hits African countries. So it's definitely necessary to do ground truthing of actual use. So a very important comment. Maybe someone knows about this, Innocent. Maybe you have heard something. Please share. In the meantime, maybe Tankari with also a comment. Question.
Okay. Thank you, Lucas, for moderating this session. And thank you, Ismail, for presenting this strong evidence. I have two questions, I think, related to the impact on household income. During the presentation, I saw that during the 2022 year, the impact on household income will be positive. There will be an increase, but from 2023, it will be negative. So I would like to know what can expect that decrease, because you mentioned that in Rwanda, there is a small production of wheat. So depending on the degree of substitution between the import and domestic production, we can expect that with this price increase, household can shift to the consumption of domestic product, so which can increase the local production. So we might expect a positive increase of household income. So I would like to have some clarification on this result. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tankari. So as I was saying, you have one shock happening the first year, and you have at least two happening second and third year. So you have the investment channel. So basically, yes, you have a positive impact due to the substitution effect, but you have also higher higher prices, food prices, having an impact on possession power and have an impact on savings, and savings also will impact investment in the next year. So basically, the economy will slow a little bit in this case. That slowdown will also have an impact on on general investment, aggregate investment in general, and that investment also is the one that affecting rural households, despite the positive substitution effect they are observing. We can observe that moving from 2022, where they have a small positive effect, then 2023 almost that effect is neutralized, it's zero, and then it's become negative because of investment. That investment channels is is impacting more and more. I mean, basically, that's why you have lower investment. Lower investment then will have a negative impact on income. Thank you.
Perfect. We continue with Fatima.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Fatima Karim. I have a kind of comment or maybe an observation in the sense that I see that in Rwanda, organic agriculture is emerging, and this might be a form of resilience against fertilizer market shocks and the price volatility that we are seeing in the fertilizer market. And it might also be a kind of substitution effect, which Ismail mentioned that he did not see. So from my side, I'm thinking that one kind of policy imprint is to leverage and forge the use of fertilizers along with other alternative methods to penetrate the market and foster food security. Can you speak to that? Over to you, Ismail.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Fatima. I think that's an interesting comment. Basically, yes, as I was saying, when I was talking about the substitution effect for fertilizer, I was saying that this inorganic fertilizer formula is maybe a kind of substitute for organic organic fertilizer can be a substitute for inorganic fertilizer where prices have increased. Unfortunately, we have not included in our model because data on that specific activities is not available. But still, I believe, and the assumption behind is even if that substitutions is taking place, is very limited, except there is a deliberate effort that the country want to have increase in a very short time the production of organic fertilizer to substitute with that one. So the question is whether that policy response has been observed, but to my knowledge, I haven't received any information that the country is going in that direction. So if the country is not going in that direction, I believe that that substitution is limited, is very limited for the short time. For the long, medium and long run, you may have, yes, investment going in that directions, and then that's taking place, and then you have more substitution happening. But in the short run, if there is no deliberate policy, effort, channeling investment, money in that specific activities, it will be limited. Thank you.
Great, thanks everyone. I'm not sure if there are more questions. I think you have a wonderful, very powerful tool at hand, Ismail, to do a lot of good analysis. And thank you for sharing your initial results. The problem with these presentations is now you have so many ideas, new ideas for scenarios. You can't even think of all the possible scenarios we told you to do. And I add one more. There is also social protection programs going on in Rwanda. So how could they even mitigate the shock? So there are plenty more things to consider. And we are, of course, eagerly looking for more information, for more models, more simulations to be presented. And yeah, thank you for the great work. And we wish that this will yield into good policy making. Thank you. I probably, maybe we clap for Ismail first, and then we go back to Laia for the ending. Thank you so much, Ismail.
Yeah, thank you, Lucas, and thank you for the time. Also to everyone who has participated and in this webinar, and also for those who have asked questions and also commented. And thank you for your comment and your questions. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much to our speakers and participants. What an engaging and rich session this was. Thank you, Dr. Lucas Conner, for accepting our invitation to moderate, and thank you, Dr. Ismail Fofana, for accepting once again to present your findings. And this is not the last time you will be back, so we're looking forward to your next session. We invite all our participants to head to the chat. We are sharing links to our resources. Go to academia2063.org and delve into our Ukraine crisis portal, where you can view all the briefs published so far, including briefs 21 and 22 discussed today during this session. Please check on the link to our slide share. If you go to slide share, you will find all the PowerPoint presentations from this webinar series. You don't want to miss that. Kindly go to the chat and click on that link before leaving this webinar session. We will take a break next week, but we will be back on March 14th with session 12, where we will discuss the impacts on commodity markets in Mozambique with a presentation by Dr. Greenwell Machaya, moderated by Dr. Getao Tadase. And we will be looking forward to welcoming you to that session. Thank you for your commitment to our research and to this webinar series, and we look forward to welcoming you on March 14th. Take care. Bye.